The video for this unit on environment is about Abdu'l-Baha, an environmental agriculturalist. You might think that's a bit strange, and you don't think of him in that way. But I want to tell you the story, little known, about Adasiyyah, a village that Abdu'l-Baha established as an agricultural and environmental center in the Middle East. Now, many people know that Abdu'l-Baha was knighted by the British government for his services to the people of Akka during the First World War, when he was able to prevent them from starving by feeding them with grain he had stored. You recall that he accepted the honor as a gift of a just king, but he never used the title. This is the story of the village that produced that grain. And this PowerPoint video is based on an article written by the late Iraj Pushti, which was published in the Baha'i Studies Review of 2010, which is called Adasiyyah, a study in agriculture and rural development. It's a systematic study of the work of Baha'i farmers, food growers, sharecroppers, who for over half a century toiled on the lands in Adasiyyah, a village in the northwest of Jordan. This PowerPoint is also accompanied in the readings by that article, should you wish to look a little bit more at the detail of it. So here is Adasiyyah. This story focuses on the techniques and policies and measures used by Abdu'l-Baha to guide the Baha'i farmers in such a way that he was able to turn the desolate and wild vegetation and scrubland of that area into fertile farmlands, well-managed plots of vegetables and fruit orchards, and therefore changed the environment. Now, the Jordan Valley is 110 kilometers, that's 65 miles long, and 5 to 24 kilometers, 3 to 14 miles wide, and it's part of the African Great Rift Valley. The River Jordan runs through the center of the valley to the Dead Sea. Adasiyyah is situated southeast of Lake Tiberias and south of the river Yarmouk in the north of the Wadi Jordan. And here you can see a map identifying where this is, if you can locate the Dead Sea and the Sea of Galilee, you can see exactly where this is. And here's an aerial picture of it. You can see what the land is like, and you can see that area with the sea to the north, and that area around the southern tip of that sea is the location of Adasiyyah. And here's another vision of it. You can see today, this is a modern picture taken in 2009. It's very well greened and very well established with a small city off on the right. But it was not like that in the day that Abdu'l-Baha chose this land to farm. And here you can see some of the agriculture again, closer. So sometime in 1901, Abdu'l-Baha purchased the lands of Adasiyyah as a whole village or estate. The three owners heard that Abdu'l-Baha wanted to buy land, and they decided to go to Haifa and visit him. They were guests of Abdu'l-Baha for 3 days. On the 4th day, Abdu'l-Baha came to see them. He greeted them and told them that they had been his guests for 3 2/3 days. "Now, tell me what you want and what I can do for you," he asked. They said they wanted to sell the village of Adasiyyah. Abdu'l-Baha agreed to the purchase and paid them 400 Turkish lira in gold coins for 9,200 dinar, which is equivalent to 920 hectares or 2,272.4 acres. And this land was registered in the name of Abdu'l-Baha. Now, according to the system of land ownership at that time, each piece of land was considered to be divided into 24 qirats, irrespective of the size of the area. Soon after the completion of the transaction, Abdu'l-Baha gave 1 qirat, that is 1/24th, of the total area of 900 620 hectares. That is, he gave 38.33 hectares back to the original owners. He gave 3 karats to his brother, Mirza Muhammad Ali, despite the latter's rebellion against him. That's another story. He gave 1 karat, that is 38.33 hectares, to the Mufti of Akka. The total area of land given away by Abdu'l-Baha was 1/4 of the total of 920 hectares. That is, he gave away 230 hectares. Thus, out of the 920 hectares, Abdu'l-Baha was left with a total land area of 690 hectares. Now, the majority of the people living in that Transjordan area were Arabs. The vast majority were Sunni Muslim, and there were a small percentage of Christians, most of whom, the non-Arab Christians, were Armenians. According to a handbook from 1943, there were thought to be Baha'is to the number of about 1,000 in Adasiyyah, 265 in 1922, and 350 in 1931 in the Haifa and Akka areas. And there you can see a picture of some of them. That's the Asji family. The agricultural and rural development of Adasiyyah began during the reign of Sultan Abdul-Hamid II, when Abdu'l-Baha was living in the prison city of Akka. The condition of the people living there, the peasants, sharecroppers, small farmers in the 19th century Jordan, and under the rule of the Ottoman Empire, was wretched, with poor cultivation habits and very high taxes. So the first phase. The land was covered by natural vegetation, scrubland with bushes and trees and thorny shrubs, especially the lotus tree cedra. Preparing this land for crop and animal production was a formidable task. The first group of Baha'i farmers cleared the brush and scrub and started cultivating the land. Mirza Vahid, the son of Mirza Muhammad Quli, the half-brother of Baha'u'llah, and Haji Ali Yazdi. Abdu'l-Baha recommended cultivating the land and growing wheat and barley as the first crops. The 2 Baha'i farmers cultivated part of that land for 3 years, but stopped because the inhabitants of the neighboring Arab villages often robbed them or plundered whatever they produced. Abdu'l-Baha then leased the land for 5 years to a wealthy Christian merchant who had a good reputation and was an experienced businessman. He built the first guest house in Adasiyyah. His lease stated he was to build a house, stables, and animal sheds in lieu of 1 year's rent, and to clear the brush and scrub and wild bushes, and to prepare the land for production of crops and the building of houses. But in 1906 his crop failed, and what he had was stolen, and he could only build 1 house, so he asked Abdu'l-Baha to release him from his agreement. Now, the second phase began in 1907, when Abdu'l-Baha wrote to the Spiritual Assembly of Tehran and asked them to send a number of Baha'i farmers to come to Akka and eventually settle in Adasiyyah. The assembly suggested some farmers of Zoroastrian background who were living in a village near Yazd. Bahram Behmardi was the first to move to Adasiyyah. His wife, Katiun, stayed for 4 months in Abdu'l-Baha's house in Haifa. Then she followed her husband in 1908. About 20 families arrived before 1911. With the expansion of agricultural activities, more families arrived between 1911 and 1913, with the last family arriving from Yazd in 1916. Now, before the farmers started to cultivate the land, Abdu'l-Baha instructed these Baha'is to meet, consult, and then to divide the land among themselves. Every farmer was to take charge of a certain area of farmland in proportion to the size of his family. Now, they have faced a number of difficulties, these farmers. First of all, they did not know the local language. Secondly, they did not know how to deal with the local workers and neighboring villagers. Also, before World War I, the Ottomans were still in power, and life under their harsh administration was often very hard and unbearable. Furthermore, the climate was hard to bear. It is one of the hottest places on earth, near the Dead Sea. Abdu'l-Baha encouraged the farmers to persevere and assured them of better days to come, always encouraging them to do their best. Abdu'l-Baha told the farmers that the land they were farming was dedicated to the shrines of Baha'u'llah and the Bab. That is, it would go to help pay for them. He said that they had no future right of ownership of the land, and he told them that whilst they were contributing to the shrines of the Bab and Baha'u'llah, they were assisting the growth of the faith. Now this was a great source of inspiration and encouragement to them, and so they exerted a lot of effort to produce more crops. Abdu'l-Baha himself took a great interest in the agricultural development of the community and in the environment around Adasiyyah. He visited the village and the Baha'is as often as he was able. He stayed with the local Baha'is, and when he did, they held 19-day feasts and Baha'i meetings with him. He always gave money to the poor and needy of the village, and he suggested that they build an orphanage. And here you could see Abdu'l-Baha with some of the farmers from Adasiyyah in a photograph taken around World War I. Now Abdu'l-Baha gave guidance and recommendation to the farmers. You remember that Abdu'l-Baha himself was not actually a farmer. He was not an agriculturalist, although he had grown up on the lands of his father in Tehran when he was a very young boy. You remember the story that whilst he was making a visit to some of those lands, he gave away his father's sheep to the people who were looking after them. The recommendations that Abdu'l-Baha made to the farmers in Adasiyyah was about how to develop the social aspects of community life, how to treat their neighbors who were not Baha'is, and how to establish bonds of friendship with them. He also gave them some ethics, which today we would call business ethics. So Abdu'l-Baha's first visit was for a whole month in April of 1914, and the Holy Family came as well. They lived in a tent, and later in a room near the railway station. Indian pilgrims also arrived in the village during that period. Abdu'l-Baha often suggested that pilgrims visit Adasiyyah, and several did. Abdu'l-Baha's second visit was in March 1916, during the First World War. The Ottomans were fighting the British and its allies during this time, and they wanted to send the inhabitants of Adasiyyah and other villages in the district, including the Baha'is, to the front in order to fight in the war. The Baha'is sent a messenger to inform Abdu'l-Baha about this, and Abdu'l-Baha sent the messenger back and rode overnight to get to Adasiyyah the next day, which was Nowruz. 2 days later, the government declared that the exiled Baha'is of Iran and other non-Baha'i Persian exiles would be exempt from military service. Now, Abdu'l-Baha spent some time in this building, and you can see the picture here, which is the Office of Administration, which was built close to the site of the future Hazrat al-Quds. It was the first building that Sorgho built in the early years of his tenancy. Mirza Hadi Afnan, Shoghi Effendi's father, also lived in this building and managed a farm in Adasiyyah. Before his departure in that first visit, Abdu'l-Baha blessed this house and told Mirza Hadi to look after it, because Abdu'l-Baha himself had lived in it. The third visit of Abdu'l-Baha was in July of 1917 and took 15 days. At this time, World War I was at its peak, and that same year there was below average rainfall, and the crop yields were very low. people locally were distressed at the prospect of imminent famine, which is a problem in all desert areas such as this. Abdu'l-Baha arrived in Adasiyyah saying that he needed wheat for both Haifa and Akka. So the Baha'i farmers opened up their barns and storage bins and offered Abdu'l-Baha all they had. They also went to a number of neighboring villages, identified suppliers, and purchased wheat there. Abdu'l-Baha bought up all the wheat that could be found. Then, on his instructions, consignments of wheat were sent over a period of 15 days to Haifa. A caravan of some 200 camels was mobilized and used to ship the wheat to Haifa and Akka. A total of 400 camel sacks of wheat, and here you can see a picture of that sort of caravan of camels carrying that wheat. The Baha'is continued to buy more wheat for a month after this. And as a result, hundreds of poor, needy, and destitute people benefited from the wheat that was shipped to Haifa by Abdu'l-Baha and later distributed to them by him. On his fourth visit, in 1920, Abdu'l-Baha told the farmers that while they had been paying 1/3 of their farm produce to the holy household, meaning himself, this ratio was too high. He reduced the rate to 1/5 after taxes, that is, 80% for farmers and 20% for him, to be implemented with honesty and sincerity. He emphasized the importance of meeting together every night, holding prayer sessions, and consulting to resolve personal problems. And he advised them to pay their farm laborers a portion of the net income they earned. Now you can say that this is, again, a sort of business ethics, it's a business model. Interesting that he actually reduced the amount to himself as the landowner and gave more to the people who are actually laboring on the land, and asked that the actual farm laborers also earn a portion of the net income that was received. Now, the next problem, of course, was dealing with the climate. This is a desert area, and the heat from June to September is stifling at least 38 degrees centigrade. That's 100 degrees Fahrenheit. The rainfall is amazingly quite high, between 480 millimeters and 643 millimeters per annum. Abdu'l-Baha wrote a special prayer for the Baha'i farmers, and this is a provisional translation of that prayer. He is God, O Lord. These friends have traversed mountains and deserts, plains and prairies, until they have arrived at the destined abode, and now in Gor are in deep contemplation, and have no refuge and haven but thee, and wish no help in peril and respondent but thee. Have mercy upon us, grant favor to us, and shower guidance on all. One of the things that Abdu'l-Baha did was to provide a remedy for the malaria that was rampant in the area. Abdu'l-Baha told the Baha'is to plant a particular tree, that's a Latin name I cannot pronounce, that produces quinine in its bark. The chemicals in the leaves of these trees and branches acted as a deterrent to the vectors and the malaria parasite. Each Baha'i farmer planted 10 to 30 quinine saplings around the lagoon in the middle of Adasiyyah that was the major breeding ground for mosquitoes. These saplings grew very quickly, and through the process of transpiration, they sucked up a large amount of the water of the lagoon. This reduced the amount of space where the mosquitoes could breed, and gradually the incidence of malaria declined, and eventually it disappeared altogether. At the same time, the strong wood from the quinine trees was purchased by local builders, and that was used in the construction of the trusses for the ceilings of their homes. and Abdu'l-Baha also introduced a diversification of the crops. As early as 1910, the Baha'i farmers began the shift from pure farm crop production to that of vegetable and fruit crop production. But they also had to cater for the staple diet, so Abdu'l-Baha advised them to keep part of the land under farm crops. Thus, they grew a wide range of products. Barley, wheat, chickpeas, lentils, and broad beans were produced side by side with vegetables such as cucumbers, eggplants, fruits such as bananas, tomatoes, and oranges. In the early 1900s, citrus trees were not yet grown in the region, but Abdu'l-Baha encouraged the Baha'is to shift their system of agricultural production from purely farm and vegetable crops to fruit tree production. Citrus trees were produced by grafting buds on sour orange or tangerine stalks, while grapefruit was grafted on sour orange stalk only. Abdu'l-Baha recommended to growers that they should allow a spacing of 8 paces, almost 6 meters, between the trees. He specifically instructed them to grow table grapes, oranges, lemons, tangerines, grapefruit, lime, sweet lime, which is a much bigger and sweeter version of lime with soft, thin, and bright yellow skin that's used extensively in Iran and other Middle Eastern countries. Limu, they call it in Persian. Bananas he also instructed them to grow, and a number of other fruits. The sour oranges were also grown. He also instructed them to grow apples, pears, sour cherries, which Persians love, abalu, pomegranates, and quince. Grapes were grown on a limited scale, but plums and peaches were also grown, again on a much smaller scale, and there were also mulberry trees. Abdu'l-Baha suggested that farmers grow the large yellow lemons and sesame seeds, because these crops would fetch much higher prices than other farm products. They were so unusual. The Baha'i farmers also grew a wide variety of vegetables, such as aubergine, that's eggplant, cucumber, courgettes, that's zucchini, squash, marrow, pumpkin, tomatoes, broad beans, carrots, onions, okra, kohlrabi, cauliflower, cabbage. This is the large head variety mostly grown in Iran. Peppers, potatoes, chili, cantaloupe, winter melon, watermelon, of course everyone loved that, spinach, turnips, lettuce, beetroot, and a popular local green vegetable, which was called Jew's mallow. So a very wide range of fruits and vegetables. Aubergines, or eggplants, were grown in the beginning by most farmers because they are easy to grow. I haven't found that in my garden, but of course I live in England. And they require very little cultivation, they have few pests, and they produce an abundant crop. It is said that the Iranian Baha'i farmers were the first to introduce this to the northwest of Jordan, Palestine, and Syria, that is, in the Golan Heights area. Most indigenous Arab inhabitants of the region did not know how to use aubergines, or eggplants, and they called it Baranjan Ajami, which means Persian eggplant. Now, the story of bananas is a really fascinating one. I did quite a lot of research myself about what Abdu'l-Baha said about these bananas, just to check out the story. Abdu'l-Baha introduced bananas to the region by bringing a number of shoots or suckers from India. So it was Abdu'l-Baha who brought bananas. During the last years of his life, he received 7 suckers of bananas, which he gave to the farmers in Adasiyyah. Without ever having cultivated or grown bananas, Abdu'l-Baha guided the Baha'i farmers in their planting and caring for the newly introduced fruit crop. As I said, it's believed that the Baha'i farmers and Abdu'l-Baha were the first to grow bananas in both Jordan and Palestine. And just think of all the crops that come from there today. We get a lot of bananas from Israel, that part of the world, in England. Now, some of the villagers in the area were unsure how to eat bananas and finding them quite unpalatable at first and hard to swallow, they really truly rejected them until they were shown that the outer skin had to be removed and that only the inside banana was to be eaten. Within a few years, everyone was growing bananas, and they profited greatly from this relatively lucrative business and the high demand. Now here's what I really did check out quite a lot about this. So Abdu'l-Baha instructed farmers to use what's called the basin system of planting bananas, instead of what is usually used, which is the row system. And that row system is still used today in many places. But the basin system is actually the preferred method. And Abdu'l-Baha thought that up himself. So the way that that works is that the soil around a number of trees close together is ridged up to form a small rectangular or square basin or pond between them. And the main advantage of this basin is that it holds irrigation water for a longer time and allows a gradual and slow infiltration of water into the soil, which also reduces the need for frequent irrigation. So, again, being very innovative and thinking about the environment and his agriculture, Abdu'l-Baha recommended that Baha'is raise livestock. Now, this changed the arable face of farming into that of a mixed farming system, whereby crops of cereal, protein crops produced feed for the animals, and the farmyard manure from the livestock raised the soil fertility status. So Abdu'l-Baha is gradually developing an area from really scrub and brush from nothing to quite a sophisticated system of farming, which changed not only the produce of the area and the health of the people, but the environment as well. He also introduced dairy farming, the processing of dairy products such as turning milk into cream, butter, yogurt, and cheese on each farm, and by each household brought more income. So often the Baha'i farmers who visited Haifa or Akka met with Abdu'l-Baha and sought his advice. They frequently asked him what crops to grow in the next season, and Abdu'l-Baha would then make specific recommendations for that season. He would say, "Grow these crops and you will have a bumper harvest and great bounty." Now, the first local assembly of the Baha'is at Adasiyyah was elected in 1924, that is, after the passing of Abdu'l-Baha in 1921. That assembly appointed a farming committee to oversee the farms. I don't suppose there are that many local assemblies in our country, I'm sure there's none in England, that have a farming committee. Perhaps they should. I live in a village, a farming village. Perhaps we should have one. So Abdu'l-Baha has indicated where a Hazratul Quds should be built, and exactly where, and it was built exactly where he intended it to be. It was built in the time of Shoghi Effendi, and you can see a picture of it there. Now, the legacy of Abdu'l-Baha was a sort of new kind of tenancy. He established not only this agricultural system, new crops, new planting, but he also established a sustainable system, which was safe and secure and continuous, and a fair system of tenancy for both the Baha'is and other farmers. And again, another innovation, a different kind of moral responsibility, and very significant, was his arrangement for the harvest to be shared such that the farmers had 80% of the crops, and Abdu'l-Baha, the owner, only 20%. You could call this, as I said, business ethics. He set an excellent example in his own dealings with people. He advised that the Baha'is should treat their customers and clients with a high degree of integrity and observe honor, courtesy, and fairness in their daily lives. Thus, spiritual and moral values permeated the task of conducting the business part of running the farm. Also, Abdu'l-Baha, again, as an innovation, was very concerned about the welfare and well-being of the workers. He was also concerned about their families and the day workers and the laborers who were employed either full-time, part-time, or hired just at the busiest time for crop production cycle, at planting and harvest times. Now, the day laborers working on the Baha'i-owned farms in Adasiyyah would normally come from the neighboring villages or be seasonal workers recruited from the migrating tribes that set up temporary camps near Adasiyyah. Abdu'l-Baha recommended to the Baha'i farmers that after they had harvested their crops and gathered their animal products, they should ensure that these day laborers received a share of the farm produce or farm income. He told the farmers that the significance of this divine bounty would soon become apparent to them. You can be sure that that was an extremely unusual act on Abdu'l-Baha's part. So, there are some examples of rural development from this story that we can see, and this development was instituted by Abdu'l-Baha at Adasiyyah. First, there was the construction of houses, farm roads, feeder roads, irrigation systems, and bridges, all at the bidding of Abdu'l-Baha. He also implemented children's classes and children's education. He had the community establish adult literacy classes. He introduced the processing of crops and animal products to give added value to the harvested raw materials produced on the farms. He also suggested the processing of dairy products, such as turning the milk into cream and butter and yogurt and cheese, which brought extra income. And here you can see one of the irrigation canals at the head of the Adasiyyah farmlands in 1995, so still there, and one of the Ashji brothers is standing in the foreground. And then there was World War II. And after World War II, everything changed. And this is really the end of the story. It was a very trying time for the farmers and the Baha'i community of Adasiyyah. There were a huge influx of displaced Palestinians to all parts of Jordan after the war, including into the area of Adasiyyah, and they simply couldn't be supported by the people who were living locally. The Jordanian government implemented a land reform law, which changed the way that tenancies could be held and altered the ways in which the farmers were able to live on the land. And you will recall that Abdu'l-Baha had said right at the beginning, so many years before, that the people who were working there as farmers would not have any right to own the land in the future. This is probably why he anticipated this. So by the end of 1962, there were very few or no Baha'is living in Adasiyyah. However, the Baha'i endowment properties and buildings such as the Hazrat al-Quds and places like the Baha'i Cemetery and over 283 hectares of land are still part of the Baha'i international endowments in Jordan. So it's not quite the end of the story. But I think you can see that it's a remarkable tale of how a small community was built up gradually with innovative practices, ethical business practices, very innovative agricultural methods, care for the individuals working on the farm, care for the day workers, care for all the people and their families, with Abdu'l-Baha's foresight, and including during the very important period of that First World War, where Abdu'l-Baha was able to feed so many hundreds of people, including the British troops, all from this land that he had so carefully, with the help of Baha'is from Iran, the Zoroastrian background Baha'is from Yazd area, they were able to create really what was, for a time, one of the most special places in the Holy Land.